Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. I'm so excited today. In this episode, I'm going to welcome our guest, Chris M. King. He is the principal at StatusFlow, where they help individuals and teams operate in the zone. I met Chris through Provisors, a network of professionals throughout the U.S., and knew instantly that I wanted to get him on this podcast to talk about peak performance. His grade school teachers called him disruptive, and that is exactly what high-performance executive coach and motivational speaker Chris M. King does. Chris works with professional teams and individuals to disrupt the subconscious psychological paradigms that hinder performance, brings conscious awareness to them, and realigns them so clients can maximize their resources and dramatically improve their performance. So welcome to Maximize Business Value, Chris. How are you today?
Fantastic, Tom. Thanks so much for having me. That was quite the introduction. Well done. Very impressed. I'm impressed with whoever your guest is. He sounds fantastic.
He does. And so maybe, since he couldn't be here, I'm glad you could join us. So,
right.
So tell us about your business, StatusFlow.
Thanks. StatusFlow, was my little brainchild because we do take organizations and individuals from the status quo to status flow, and it is about speed. It's about performance. It's about innovation and creativity. How do we make the impossible or even the unimaginable a reality in about 1/5 the time that everybody thought it would take to make it happen? Well, we can do that. So we consult with organizations on individuals and doing just that.
I love that play on words, from status quo to status flow. That's such fun. I mean, we can talk about that all day. So what's your background and what got you into this line of work?
Yeah, that's a very long story. So the very succinct
Don't forget,
version,
we only have an hour. Okay.
Right. I'll be brief. I was born and raised in a little town called Santa Monica, and this was in the 70s. And there's the Lords of Dogtown, right? The birthplace of skateboarding, and so I got into skateboarding and BMX bikes, and later I was professionally trained to race cars. I started with go-karts. I ended up playing ice hockey in school. So I had a very long and intimate relationship with what we call being in the zone. Now, I didn't know what this meant through the lenses of psychology or neuroscience or anything like that. I just knew what it felt like. And so I started in that space. I became a marketing director in tech. I worked at a hospital for a while. I did an education in spiritual psychology. And I basically put all of this together with my own personal history of completely disrupting and reinventing myself and my life. And I created a business out of it. And here we are today.
That's awesome. So skateboarder, huh? All right.
Yeah.
That's it. You grew up
Got
in
the
the
scars
right
to
place.
prove it.
You grew up in the right place, right? And so,
Right.
Chris, when we recently talked, you said that you help people get into, and you just mentioned it there too, you help them get into flow. What is flow?
Well, flow is the delivery vehicle for what we do. Because again, we're about achievement. Whatever you want to make happen, whatever crazy idea you have. Yeah, let's do that, and let's do it quickly. Flow is the delivery vehicle for this. It is essentially an optimum state of consciousness where you feel your best, you perform your best. You've actually experienced this, when you were working on something, maybe it was a project for work or even back in school, where it felt like 30 minutes went by, and when you looked up, 2.5 hours had passed. You had this amazing piece of work product in front of you, and you just had this moment of how great it felt to be in that space. That is what we call a flow state. This is what athletes call being in the zone or runner's high. It's all driven by neurochemistry, and you can consciously access this pretty much whenever you want if you train for it and you understand how to do it.
Well, I can't wait because you're going to talk a little bit about that because the one thing that I live for is to be in flow, then in the zone when I'm skiing, because I love to ski, and when I'm playing golf. And I can tell you that when I'm kind of in that zone playing golf, I can almost do no wrong, or even if I do wrong, I can correct it very easily. But when I'm not in that flow state, then it's always a challenge. So I can't wait for you to tell us, how to get into that flow state. So who can get into flow? Not just athletes, I'm assuming, right?
It's not athletes. They've been studying this really intensely. It started in the 60s and 70s with a guy by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me to spell that. He's out of the University of Illinois in Chicago, and he really studied this. He's kind of what we call the godfather of flow. Now, flow has its roots in positive psychology. One of my partners and colleagues actually was mentored by Abraham Maslow himself. So this goes back before that. William James, we go way back, in the history of it, they referred to this as religious experiences. And then they noticed that, non-religious people were having them, so they started calling them Pique experiences. But as the new studies have unfolded, they've studied Tibetan monks or plumbers or pretty much lawyers, any discipline there is, and it seems that anybody with, to my understanding, a biologically normal brain or close enough to it anyway, can access flow state. High performance, you're hardwired for it. Everybody is hardwired for it.
I love that. I know that I have that same feeling when I'm working on projects and things. And so that's a great descriptor of it. And so anybody can get into flow. So here's the $64,000 question. How can someone get into flow?
Great question. It's about setting conditions and behaviors to create an environment that is conducive to flow. There's what I like to call the flow paradox, because remember when you were working on that thing, we talked about when felt like half an hour went by, there was no you in that moment, right? There was just the thing you were working on, that sense of oneness, which is a characteristic of flow, having that sense of oneness. So the flow paradox, as I call it, is the simple idea of I am trying to get into flow will keep you out of it because there's an I present. So it's the same way you might build your family around a value system or organized religion. You can build your organization, build your life around flow. And there are triggers for it, or switches, we'll call them flow switches. There's 22 of them that we know of. And there are going to be things like autonomy. People need to be able to do their own thing in their own way. You need complexity. You need novelty. So new things need to come up, keep ideas fresh. If you can incorporate as many of these triggers as possible into the way you interface in your life, you can create an environment that's highly conducive to flow states.
That's awesome. So an individual can get into flow, and you mentioned autonomy. I've always been a big fan in running a business. Our listeners know that I have bought or sold 100 businesses in my career. I've started a few, but I've bought or sold 100 in my career, and I'm always fascinated by business owners who go out and really look for and find great people, and then they micromanage them and don't give them the autonomy, right? My mantra has always been find great people, kind of give them the parameters, build the fences, right? Here's where the pasture we want to play, and then go and do your thing, right? That's the reason I hired you. If I was going to do it all, I would do it myself. So individuals can get into flow. What about teams? Can teams also get into flow?
Yeah, it's actually my favorite story about flow, and this happened long before we called it that or knew what it was. Is in 1943, the War Department contacted Lockheed Corporation and said, we need you to build America's first jet fighter, and Lockheed didn't know how to do it. And the War Department said, look, here are the parameters. It needs to be 30% faster than anything we've ever built. It needs to carry this much ammo. It needs to have this kind of range. And we'll give you a little bit of money to see if you can develop it. We won't give you any physical space in which to build it. And we need you to deliver that product in 180 days. Well, Lockheed set up what later became known as the Skunk Works. And this is where the SR-71 and all the stealth planes came out of, right? This is the brainchild of those places. What they had done was they set up an organization within the organization, the Skunk Works, right? And it was rich with flow triggers. They basically separated these people from the rest of the company, gave them a direct reporting line to the people in charge. No lawyers, no HR, no nonsense, no interference, no distraction. And they ended up with a little organization that was ripe with flow triggers. And that is how they produced America's first jet fighter, the XP-80 Shooting Star, 37 days ahead of schedule. And it's because they got their teams into flow states.
Wow. Of course, I'm based here in Dallas, and we've got a huge installation for Lockheed Martin. In fact, our producer on this podcast, her husband works for Lockheed Martin. Now I've got a little piece of trivia I didn't know before. So thanks for sharing that. But so some teams seem to achieve that flow status, but others don't. Why do some achieve it, and why don't some achieve it?
Yeah, there are a lot of barriers to flow, and I like to say that flow is really expensive because it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you the friction that happens between people in teams. It's going to cost you your ego. It's going to cost you being right. It's going to cost you being absolutely certain about things. It's going to cost you being an expert, right? If you look at everything through the lens of being a student, it affects neurochemistry in a certain way. If you are married to something and this is the way to do it, I am the expert, you're locking yourself out of creativity, and it affects your neurochemistry. It affects how your brain works. So it's all about leveraging, understanding your brain, understanding how it works, and removing the barriers to flow states. Distraction is another one. We have this Pavlovian relationship with our phones. You know, it goes ding and we get excited because there's a chemical in the brain called dopamine, and you're getting a dopamine hit, which is a pleasure chemical. So we hear that notification, we get a little excited. It feels really good. So you have to wean yourself off the drug addiction to dopamine and get yourself more attached to something else. And that something else is flow. Flow is the most, and the way I heard it said best was autotelic experience that humans can have. And autotelic is a scientific fancy word for addictive, because in that community, they don't want to use that word. So if what I tell clients is, you stick with me, I'll give you the best drugs of your life, you know?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, that does kind of create that euphoric experience. Autotelic. Mm-hmm. Thanks for explaining that, because I was going to ask you what that means. You know, somebody who's so well read like you know, you're right. When we hear the phone ding, when we see an email pop up, you know, it is constantly distracting us. I remember a story back in my old advertising days. One of the businesses that I was in many years ago was media advertising. And I'm trying to remember who it was, but there was an advertising executive, one of these big guys. I mean, like David Ogilvy kind of, level of person who, when he was in a conversation, of course, this was back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and we didn't have voicemail. We didn't have email back at the time. That was long before Al Gore invented the internet. So we didn't have those things. And so if you didn't answer your phone, there was no machines either, by the way, to take a call. And so if you didn't answer your phone, you didn't know who called, right? There was no who caller ID or any of that stuff. Well, he was famously sitting in his office one day having a conversation with somebody, and the phone behind him started ringing. And he just continued on with the conversation. And because he had trained himself that that's not a trigger for him, right? But the other person was getting more and more uncomfortable while the phone was ringing, and finally said, "Are you going to answer that?" He goes, "If it's important, they'll call back."
Flow is all about behavior modification. And that's the tricky part, because What we have to do is very counterintuitive to create the kind of performance that we're trying to achieve. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. My favorite example, because everybody gets it: working more hours to get more done, right? How many people are working more hours to get more done? That is the same thing, Tom, as using your credit card to buy more stuff, right? That's the hamster wheel. And it is going to get you into trouble at some point. It's like, it's fine in an emergency, but if that emergency becomes the norm, you're going to go bankrupt. And the same is true with your time. So if you want to be more effective, and we look through the lens of leverage, right? Input to output ratio. This isn't about efficiency or productivity. This is about leverage. And if you want to move the needle and get things done, you do the counterintuitive. Instead of working 50, 55 hours a week, you work 35 hours a week. And you learn how to prioritize and really get things done and move the needle. And if you need proof of this, I can give you a simple example. How much stuff did you get done Monday through Thursday when you knew you were going on a 2-week vacation Friday morning?
Yeah, lots.
Right?
I love that. Yes. Right.
So you get real good at filtering through the nonsense. You get really good at delegating, deferring, or deleting the things that do not make the impact, and you are shameless about it.
I love that. I've always had a saying, and now you've articulated to me why I've always said this. I tell folks, hey, work today like it's the last day before your vacation. Because I'm like everybody else. If I'm going to go on vacation, I want to go with a clear conscience, right? That I've gotten everything done, and that's proof that you can train yourself to prioritize and get those things done in a shorter amount of time. So I totally love that. We're going to take a break. We're talking with Chris M. King. Taking a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Every business will eventually transition. Some internally to employees and managers, and some externally to third-party buyers. Mastery Partners equips business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their businesses on their terms using our 4-step process. We start with a snapshot of where your business is today. Then we help you understand where you want to be and design a custom strategy to get you there. Next, we help you execute that strategy with the assistance of our amazing resource network. And ultimately, you'll be able to transition your business on your terms. What are you waiting for? More time? More revenue? If you want to maximize your business value, it takes time. Now is that time. Get started today by checking us out at www.masterypartners.com or email us at info@masterypartners.com to learn more.
We're back with Chris M. King, and we're talking about getting into and staying in flow. So, Chris, what are the benefits of flow?
Well, there are many. As you know, when we talked about how you were working on that project that felt like time just slipped past, there was no stress. There was no sense of overwhelm, no sense of burnout. There was no sense of panic in that moment. And so that's a huge benefit, because feelings drive actions. Basic neuroscience: feelings drive actions, actions produce results. What are the actions you're going to take when you are panicked? What are the actions you're going to take when you are feeling that good, right? So you're going to get performance improvement. You're going to get a major decrease in stress. You're going to get all kinds of creativity. In measuring this, we have seen increases of anywhere from 700 to up to 3,000% in creativity and innovation while working less hours and dropping stress to 0. It sounds too good to be true, but you have experienced this. You know what that felt like when you crushed it that day. We do that every day.
I love that. No stress. Our listeners know that I'm an avid reader. I probably read 40 to 50 books a year, and a book that I read I don't know, a year or two ago, and refer back to it frequently, is one by Jen Sincero, and she talks about in there, why are you stressing? She's like, why? You're stressing that you need to get something done, and you're not doing it, and you're stressing about it. Why are you stressing? You know you're going to get it done, so stop stressing about it. If you want to go play golf, then go play golf because you know that you're going to meet the deadline. and I love that when talking with that, talking with folks about that. I used to get stressed when I did play golf because thinking about all the things that I needed to be doing, but I could calm my nerves by going, I know I'm going to get them done. So stay out here and enjoy the day. It's going to recharge my batteries so that I can go out and do that stuff. So you talk about operating at Pique, Pique. You're a peak performance coach. And that's different from PEAK. So for our listeners, it sounds the same, peak and peak, but it's PIQUE. What exactly does that mean?
That's a great question, and it not always does it come to be that people notice that difference. It is intentional, but peak in its definition is about the upset and the disruption. This work is very uncomfortable. Like I said, it requires behavior modification. We are going to challenge your very notion of reality. And that's going to get upsetting because I'll give you the roadmap of how your reality has been created to this point, because we can reverse engineer it. The way that it unfolded is that, and this is basic neuroscience, everybody has an operating system in their head, just like a phone or a computer. You have an operating system. You are the author and architect of that system. And you finished creating it when you were about 6 years old. So that's how long that system's been running and verified. So your system, we call it a belief system. Your belief system generates every single thought you have. Once you have that thought, you experience it as a feeling. Your feelings drive your actions produce results. Now, here's where people get weird. The results that you produce are unconsciously pre-designed to validate the system that started it. It's a feedback loop going around and around. So essentially, people are going out into the world and unconsciously seeking to validate a system they don't know anything about. So we are going to call
thrust upon them.
Right. Once you've written that system, you'll call it reality. You'll call it your worldview. This is your understanding of the world. I'm going to call that into question and say, maybe you're wrong. Because once we do that, we start decoding and recoding that system. We align it with an entirely new reality. I am not being grandiose when I say you can renegotiate your existence on this planet.
I totally agree with you. Many times in the different businesses that I've had, I've hired new salespeople, and I always kind of ran sales training myself for parts of it. And one of the things that I constantly remind salespeople is you've heard this over and over, and I don't know where the quote originated, but whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Because our brains like to be right. And if I walk into a situation and I already know, I've predetermined in my brain that the outcome is going to be bad, and when the bad outcome comes, regardless of how bad it is for me, I get the happy trigger because I was right.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
It's more than your brain liking to be right. Your brain doesn't like to be right. Your brain needs to be right. Your ego likes to be right, but the brain needs it, because if all of a sudden you go out into the world and reality is not what you thought it was. Imagine, the Matrix taking the pill, and instead of waking up in your bed, you wake up in a pod and with all these tubes, and you get flushed into reality, right? That's going to freak you out. You cannot live and function in the world in a constant state of threat response, right? Fight or flight. So your brain needs to believe that all of this is as I expect and want it to be. And we spend a lot of our energy proving that we're right because we need to feel safe in the world. If you can get comfortable enough in being unsafe without triggering threat response, magic happens.
So you teach people kind of how to reprogram these thought processes, I'm guessing. So I don't want to put words into your mouth. How do you work with your clients? What does that look like?
Yeah, and that's a great question because I've walked down this path. I mean, I was a psychological shit show. I would say that I had a dysfunctional childhood, but that implies there's another kind. Um, but in order for me to realign myself with an entirely new reality, and this is everything from business success to romantic partnership, I could not succeed at anything until I completely deconstructed my entire inner world and my being and realigning it with a new outcome. And so what we'll do with whether it's a team or an individual is, day one, question one, what do you want? We get very clear about this. What do we want and what are our resources? And then we're going to spend the next minimum of 6 months boxing our compass to that magnetic north. And we're going to align everything. In this work, there's no good or bad. There's no right or wrong. There is aligned or misaligned through the belief system to the thoughts, the feelings, the actions, the results. It's an alignment problem if we don't have what we want. So it is about aligning all of that with your physical being, with your energy, your attitude, your mindset, and even your neurochemistry. We are aligning this to whatever the outcome is that you desire.
I love that. And so how long does it typically take? You say, 6 months. How long does it typically take to kind of get all of this stuff working and get into flow on a regular basis?
Well, that depends on the
basis
yeah. I'll answer that like a lawyer. It depends. It depends on a couple things. Number one, what do you want? And number two, it also depends on how willing you are to what I like to call let go of the side of the pool. If you want me to train you to swim like an Olympic champion, I can do that. You're going to have to let go of the side of the pool. It's scary and uncomfortable and weird. Remember when you learned how to swim? It was terrifying. When we let go of the safety and the security of the side of the pool and put ourselves in an unfamiliar environment where we're no longer, vertical, we're horizontal. And now I got my face in the water that could kill me. Like, it's terrifying. But if you can the sooner you can let go of the side of the pool, the safe and the familiar, the sooner you're going to swim like a champion.
That's awesome. I don't remember learning how to swim, but I'm in probably the minority. When I was born, my parents lived in an apartment complex that actually had a pool in the Washington, D.C. area. And my parents were so terrified that I was going to fall in the pool and drown that as an infant, they put me in the pool, threw me in, and it was instinctive. So I learned that even before I was conscious of it. And so I'm a big fan of that. We should just go out and throw our babies in the pool. But for as we get older, you have to learn these things, and holding on the side of the pool, you know that it's danger, and that's really important. I call that kind of coachability, right? Are you going to be able to let go of the side of the pool? I love that analogy. I hadn't thought about that before. But I do the same thing when I'm talking with clients. When I'm having that initial conversation, I'm trying to assess how coachable is this person, because I'm going to have to coach them into doing new things that are perhaps uncomfortable or that are time consuming. And if they're not coachable, then it's almost impossible for me to do my job. What happens if somebody is not coachable in your world?
I just don't take them on as a client. I mean, and because we are talking about behavior modification, that just doesn't change overnight, and I don't tell clients what to think. I don't tell them what to do. I don't do advice. I'm not in the advice business. That's not my job. My job is to facilitate the alignment, and that just doesn't happen overnight. So we tell clients, look, it's going to be a minimum of 6 months. Most of our clients hire us for around 12 to 18. If we're doing our job right, you don't really need us after this. I've had clients that, one of my favorite testimonials was from a client that said, Chris, I got more out of working 3 months with you than I got out of 2 years of therapy. And it's not that one is better than the other. It just solves a different problem. Right. So, it's very personal to everybody. It's very intimate. It's very connected, and it's very nuanced.
So this podcast is about building value so business owners can exit their business on their terms. So why would someone who's thinking about their exit strategy, which might be most of our audience here, even if it's years from now, right? They're thinking about it and they're defining it years from now, which we tell our clients that we need at least 3 years to be thinking about this, and we've got clients that have a much longer runway. But if they're thinking about that, then why would they even care about getting into flow?
Right. Why do I need to perform so well if I'm basically packing up and moving on? Well, we have not done a whole lot in the exit strategy space until recently, because we're getting a lot of younger organizations, CEOs in their 30s, that are like, we want to sell this thing in 3 to 5 years. Now, here's the deal about the exit. The world today ain't going to be the world in 3 to 5 years. And here's the kind of math we're talking about. Ray Kurzweil came up with this, and I learned this from Stephen Kotler at the Flow Research Collective. 1920 is to 2020 as 2020 is to 2030. You're going to see 100 years of advancement in the next 10. 40% of Fortune 500 companies today don't exist in 10 years. The top paying jobs in 10 years aren't a thing today. So if you want to be out of your business in 3 to 5 years, that's like saying, oh, it's 1920. You want to be out of your business. You need to think in terms of, 40 years later or something like that, right? I mean, the world it's moving so fast. You need to be able to exit to maximize however you're getting out to a world that doesn't exist today. So it requires speed and creativity. And that is what we do at StatusFlow. It's all about velocity and innovation. That's the intersection we practice at.
Awesome. So if you're going to give one piece of advice, the most important thing that you're talking to a business owner, you want to give them the most important thing that they should do to build value, what would that be?
Well, as I said, I don't really give advice. I'm not in the advice business.
But I would trick you into it.
Right. I would say challenge your assumptions. Challenge where you think you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. Challenge what you think is valuable in your business right now. What does the future value look like? I think there are so many ways. If you are not continuing to build your business and create and innovate while you're trying to get out, you're not going to have something worth having when it's time to get out, because it'll be obsolete. The technologies that we're designing right now are even obsolete. Yeah. So going back to like the military, right? We're up to 6th generation fighter jets now. And the ones that were in development, like if we're not thinking about 7th gen already, they're going to be obsolete by the time we produce them. So it really is about how do we continue to make sure that we create so that whatever we have in 3, 5, 10 years from now has even more value.
Okay, you're not going to like hearing this, but that is great advice.
It's merely a suggestion I will offer for consideration.
I get it. So our longtime listeners know that they always listen all the way to this point because they want to know the answer to this next question. I always ask a bonus question. What personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
Oh man, it's what my father would call my recalcitrant nature. Which again, my father's an electromagnetic compatibility engineer. So these are the words he would use when I was a child. You're so recalcitrant. It's like a fancy word for stubborn. Okay, got it. But I think that has been really useful because I tend to be the rebel without a cause. I tend to be disruptive, like I said in grade school, challenge anything that was spoon-fed to me. I always wanted to know why, explain this, justify, because if you can't make this make sense to me, I'm not receiving or accepting it. And so I think that constant bucking the system, daring to be wrong, daring to challenge them to be wrong, and especially to challenge myself to be wrong, which was the hardest part. I had to eat a lot of crow, and I am all the better for it.
Well, good for you. Just like me, I've sat in the CEO shoes for so many years, and that resonates with my clients. You also have gone through this process yourself, and that gives you credibility. So well done, sir. How can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
Thanks. They can go to Instagram is a great place. It's the Status Flow. You can catch us on our god awful website, which I encourage everybody to do because the idiot that built the last 4 websites was me. And now we have we have marketing people, website people, as one of my good friends said to me, advice that he got from his dad: let the plumbers plumb. So we're going to let the website people do website stuff. And, so statusflow.net is the website. The old one that was built by me, the new one should be out before the end of the year. It's very close to done and it's very cool. So statusflow.net.
All right. Well, before you release that, I would encourage you to go back and read Building a Story Brand. It is a great book about being able to get your message across. I wasn't going to make any disparaging comments about your website. I thought it was absolutely exceptionally adequate.
Right. It is really good enough for the moment,
Well, thanks. This has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you. Thanks for being our guest today, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
So you can find Chris at statusflow.net. I would encourage you to get there before the new website comes out. You can find him on LinkedIn, Chris M. King at LinkedIn. And of course, you can always reach out to me. I will be happy to make a warm introduction. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and subscribe or follow us wherever you found this podcast. We love comments and we always respond to all of them. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to get into flow while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.